Good afternoon. I'd like to open up today's Merced County Association of Governments meeting. We are a little late. We'll let the record note that we started at 3:03. And I can say Director Pereira just entered. So let's go ahead and move to the roll call. I went to number 3, everybody to the roll call before the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Director Villalta, and then we'll have the invocation.
Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now we'll move to the invocation. Seeing nobody, Mr. Pereira, would you like to lead us in invocation?
Sure. Heavenly Father, I ask that you guide us as we make our decisions today, that you give us clear minds, pure hearts, that we might make the best decisions for the County of Merced. And I ask that you bless everyone here. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. Now we'll move to roll call.
Director Aguilar, Director Creighton, Director Espinoza, Director Hogue, here. Director Lohr, here. Director Murphy, here. Director Oliveira,
Here.
Director Pereira,
Here.
Director Silvera, Director Villalta,
Here.
Chair McDaniel.
Present. Thank you. We have a quorum.
Yes.
Seeking approval for the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. That was Pereira and Lohr. Silvera. Oh, yeah, sorry. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposition? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. And this time we'll open it up for public comment. Anybody who'd like to speak on behalf of this board can step up to the mic and do so now. Seeing none, we'll move to the minutes. And I believe, Mr. Murphy, you had a comment on this?
Yeah, I wanted to, I didn't have any issues with the minutes except clarification on the point that was brought up last meeting in terms of putting together a subcommittee for examining the board composition. The discussion at the meeting, and I'm looking to the other directors to see if that's their recollection as well, though it is recorded, was that the chair have discretion to appoint, but that there would be balance between 2 east side, 2 west side, and 2 city and 2 county representatives. So the reason I bring it up is because nominations were brought forward that had the east side, west side, but not the 2 and 2. I mean, the meeting's recorded.
I was there. That's the only recording I have is in my head. I specifically remember, because it was the maker of the motion, that there was conversation on trying to figure out the dais, okay, we were going to have 2 east side, 2 west side. Was it going to be small city, big city? And then it was kind of, there was no real consensus on that. So the way that we just left it was at the discretion of the chair to set up a subcommittee. That's how I remember it. If somebody wants to go back and watch the video and give me specifics differently, that's how I remember it. It wasn't determined. We were trying to figure out, well, if you want 2 cities, well, then is it a city from the east side? I just remember there being some discussion about that, but not coming to any kind of conclusion because if we did it one way, then it precluded somebody else. So I just thought we left that to the discretion of the chair to make the subcommittee. But that's just my recollection of it.
Yes, Mr. Volta. Just push the button.
This one? Okay. I remember just parts of the conversation, but again, as Mr. Silvera said, it said small city, big city on each side, and east side and west side. Do we have a formulation of the committee? Because I haven't been contacted about anything.
Yes,
So-
yes, we have. So I did a member from the smallest city in the county, a member from the largest city in the county. I have Joe Oliveira because he's been the longest sitting member of this formation, and then it's myself. So it's actually 3 cities and 1 supervisor.
So if we said 2, 2, and 2, as Mr. Murphy recollects, that would be 6 people. And so if we did 2 east side, 2 west side, and 2 from the county, that would be 6 people. And if we did small and big, as Mr. Silvera recollects, then that doesn't kind of make sense and jive with what everyone thought.
Well, when I went back and reviewed the tape, I acted upon it. I put together the executive committee, and we came together and I discussed it with them. Mr. Creighton wasn't available for the executive, so it was Joe Oliveira and myself, and we put together the committee. And it was given direction for me to put together the committee.
Yes,
I mean, at the end of the day,
there were specific parameters within that.
There wasn't. It wasn't part of the motion.
Well, you have other people that recollect something else.
Well, did you go back and review the tape?
No, I'm just going by. We have people that talked about this, and if you'd like to get me a copy of it, I'll review it also.
It's available online.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I just, number one, it can't be 6 because that would be a majority of the board. And my recollection was there was some discussion of, at that point during the meeting, trying to come up with the makeup of the committee. And when I said big city, small city, county, east side, west side, I wasn't being very specific as to those were the exact ones. It just was, we tried to figure out, and it was, I remember it being like, well, if you pick Merced or this one or that one, there was always going to be some kind of conflict, and I felt like we just left it to the discretion of the chair is how it left. We didn't walk out of there setting any parameters on the subcommittee.
So I think from the discussion, what I remember is, and this is not a reflection on the members, but in some ways it is, that the 2 people who were selected were negatively against any type of changing of anything, Mr. McDaniels, and probably including yourself. So I think stacking the committee, and I think in all fairness, is something that bothers me a little bit, that you don't have a balance of opinions on the committee itself. So it's a problem that people express their opinion already and of what they thought should happen, and I think a balance of how the committee was formed should have been a priority.
It's reflected in the minutes how I did it. I mean, I went smallest city, largest city, longest sitting member, and myself. And I felt that if we needed another supervisor, I could pull in Mr. Silvera to be a part of the committee because he's the newest member on here as well. So it's not a stack. There was a methodology to how it came about.
And I would say that methodology is
Lee
flawed.
Lohr was before you.
So.
Thank you. So I'm going to assume that this is in reference to page 13 of our agenda packet, and this is for the public's reference. So Director Murphy, your point in bringing this up is that, do you want to revise the minutes, or I'm going to defer to legal counsel in this. Are we discussing the how the minutes are written, or how we're implementing what happened? Or I just want to be clear on the decision that we're. So you want to revise the minutes then? Okay, so that wasn't too clear. Thank you.
That's the agenda item we're on, is the minutes.
Well, is the complaint that the minutes are wrong? You don't revise the minutes unless they're incorrect. If they're correct, they're correct.
Well, you
I
can,
assume that would be reflected in the tape of the meeting.
you can revise them if they're incorrect or if they're too vague. So there was a lot more direction given in that meeting that's not reflected in the minutes. So the minutes just say, create a subcommittee to further explore the issue of the board composition. In fact, it doesn't even say that the board chair was directed to do it, but we all have recollection of that as well. So that's my point.
Well, what I'm reading in the minutes seem to say the chair was provided the authority to appoint directors to the committee.
Create a subcommittee, reduce the number of board. So that's the point that I'm making, is that my recollection of the last meeting, which is supposed, should be a reflection of the minutes, is not accurate. So, or perhaps there wasn't. Also what I heard just a few moments ago was that this actually wasn't agendized. Was that part of the issue too? That it was only agendized for the changing of the board and not for a subcommittee?
There was a motion and a vote.
Oh, no one disputes that.
If I could. The comment about not being agendized was the council, Emily Hayden, at the last meeting when there was discussion about specific appointments to be made at the meeting. She clarified in the tape, I double checked on this, that because the appointment action wasn't agendized, that that was part of the discussion about giving the authority to the chair to do that, because the actual action to appoint Director A, B, and C to a committee wasn't part of the agenda item. It was to support or reject an amendment to the JPA.
Well, I guess I just go back to my original comment. There's been resistance from the board chair on this topic that really is inconsistent with his role as the chair for facilitating conversation. And I agree. Frankly, it's hard not to see, and agree with the comments that Director Villalta made.
I just have one question. So do we have the words of the motion, what we actually voted on?
Yes, page 13.
Yeah, I can't find it.
Oh, page 13,
Well,
the third paragraph.
Right above the item number 16, Lloyd.
Oh.
The bottom of item 15.
gotcha. Okay, I was looking at it the wrong. Okay.
And I may be missing it. I also didn't see in here where it said to give the chair. Although that's my recollection as well. I think we all recollect that. But council said that you did see it. I may be missing it. I'm just looking at the minutes say Director Silvera motion to reject the proposed amendment to the MCAG bylaws and joint powers agreement to reduce the number of board members from 11 to 9 as per the proposed amendment language, and create a subcommittee to further explore the issue of the board composition. Period. So that's what I read. I may be missing it.
You are. It's the paragraph above.
Okay, so it's not with the motion then.
It says the chair was provided the authority to appoint directors to the subcommittee. I don't know.
Outside the motion then.
I don't know if it's outside the motion or not. Frankly, I wasn't here. So I guess the best thing to do would be to either look at the tape or something. But the only thing before the board right now is to approve or not approve the minutes. And that's the only action item. So if you choose not to approve the minutes, they're not approved.
I don't know what it hurts to wait another meeting to have minutes approved.
I can find it if we want and listen to it. That's why I got it up.
It's up to the chair, not to me.
Well, we don't have to, let's just move on. The minutes, we can push those on to the next meeting.
Yep.
and then we'll give everybody a chance to review it, and then we can relook at it at the next meeting. Yes.
Yes, and formally, I'd like to just place into the record that the opinions were expressed at that meeting as to how people felt, and with the committee as the makeup now as it is, it doesn't look like it's going to be an open process with how it would come back, and it looks like it's like 3-1 with 1 in favor and 3 against, based on what was stated at the last meeting. So I would say that I'm just making the statement that if we want to be transparent and we want to have a fair process, that if people have already expressed their opinions, how they feel, we should balance those opinions out to get a balance of minds in the committee itself. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could add one more thing, is so we already voted on not reducing from 11 to 9. That was a unanimous vote, as a matter of fact, at the last meeting, to basically vote down the change of going from 11 to 9. That was what my motion was, and then it was to set up a subcommittee to further discuss other potential options, because it was originally presented as going from 11 to 9, and then at the day of, the conversation changed to try to go to something to add more. And so it's fair enough, but I mean, why don't we just do this, Mr. Chair? I would say, when you just scrap the committee you made and put Director Murphy and Director Villalta as a committee, and they can research potential ideas and then bring them back to us. Would that satisfy? I mean, because the way that you're saying now is that the process is going to be tainted because of the makeup of it.
But that's not fair. But that's not fair, because now you have 2 positive people, and I want something, and I want opinions on the opposite side too. And putting Director Murphy and Director Villalta on there, that's 2 positive opinions, and that's just as bad as the committee that was selected. And I want balance of yes and no, so people can talk. That's all. I wouldn't want all positives on there. That's wrong too.
Well,
Thank you, folks.
Do I need a motion to push this to the next meeting?
can we approve everything but that item on the minutes? Is that possible?
Yes.
That is possible.
Mr. Chair, if we could, I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes, and we will take out item, I believe it would be 15. Let me get right to my paper so there's no misconfusion. Sorry, I'm minutes, and there, it is listed under. It's listed as under item 26 because we moved the item forward. So I'm sorry, it did get it took us out of order. So it will approve everything minus item 26. That'll come back at a later meeting.
Can I ask for a point of clarification?
Second.
Is just for a point of clarification on the development of the agenda for next month. Does that item come under the minutes section, or does it come back on the item as a potential discussion, information, action item on the agenda?
As a minutes item.
Yeah.
It's all, because at that time we can all watch the tape and
Yep.
we'll have a better idea.
Yep.
Is there further discussion? I have a first. Did I get a first and a second? You second it? You got the first and the second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. Next, we'll go to Citizens Advisory Committee, number 7. Ms. Yamilet. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good, thank you. Hold on, let's. on.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Yamile Valladolid. I serve on the Citizens Advisory Committee under the Health piece, and it's my honor to present to all of you today in regards to some action items that were approved at our last meeting, some informational items, and some announcements. So we're going to go ahead and start with the action items that were approved. The minutes on September 6th of 2019 Citizens Advisory Committee meeting were approved. The adopting the formal amendment number 9 to the 2019 Federal Transportation Improvement Program. The State Transit Assistance Quarter 4 distribution. The State of Good Repair 4th allocation distribution. Adopting the proposed 2020 One Voice program with the suggestion that a Citizen Advisory Committee representative be added to the current program. Authorizing the Executive Director to enter into a contract for front office security upgrades. That was discussed, that was much needed at the offices at this point. The informational items that I also have is that the Transportation Planning Measure V, there was an update on that. There was also an update on the Transit Joint Powers Authority for Merced County. There was discussion around the 2020 Ana Maria Fuentes scholarship application. And there was a couple of people who contributed towards it from the Citizens Advisory Committee as well. And for the year 1920, first quarter, there was a governing board summary. As far as the announcements, Ms. Mary Michael Rawling invited the committee to attend the new member orientation immediately following the November 1st Citizens Advisory Committee that will take place next week. Is there any questions? Thank you for having me and for all the great work that you all do.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to the Transit Joint Powers Authority for Merced County. Item number 8, Transit Joint Powers Authority for Merced County monthly update. This is information only. Nav Braggy. The floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start off with the total number of riders for the month of September is 77,000 riders that we had. Of the 77,000 riders, 17,000 were provided by Measure B. Last month, this governing board wanted information on total number of hours operated for the months. So for the month of August, it was 11,966 hours, and then for the month of September, it's 11,678 hours. Earlier this month, we released a notice of intent to negotiate with First Transit operator for operation and maintenance contract. As you know, we anticipate the cost of this contract to be considerably higher than our incumbent underbidding. The proposal received this summer did exceed our budget. Therefore, we remain in negotiation, and we'll be taking a contract to the board for authorization in the month of November. We have identified several items for cost reduction and still going back and forth with First Transit on further reducing the cost to narrow the gap between the proposal and the budget. Any questions?
Yes. Director Villalta.
Yes, and thank you. I understand that we're going to be starting now that the RTIF project is on the docket for review. I understand that we're going to be starting on the project of looking at transportation over the hill from Los Banos. And I really appreciate that, because I think we're missing a gold mine with 4,822 commuters at least in Los Banos. And if we could reduce our emissions by having a bus go across. And do they have electric buses now that are capable of going over the hill?
So, funny thing you ask, BYD did stop by our office yesterday, and they do have a over-the-coach motor bus that goes up to 200 miles on a single charge.
I thought you said roach coach.
I was going to say
no, okay.
Sorry.
Over-the-road motor coach.
Yes. So BYD did come in actually yesterday, and then they have a motor coach that goes up to 200 miles on a single charge.
Really?
Yeah.
And then how long to charge it?
So according to the sales rep, it takes about 2 hours to fully charge the bus.
So they could go over, they could drop people off, they could connect with the transit in Gilroy or San Jose?
Santa Clara.
Or Santa Clara. Yeah, and you don't have to have a train station to buy a ticket, right, Darren?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that would work out well. And do you have any idea what that study, how long it would take to get that going?
That's a Matt question.
Okay.
It's our intention to, as we spoke earlier, to have that procurement document out by the end of the year. It's going to depend. Our intention is once we get that out to sit down with the City of Los Banos and your staff to decide exactly, making sure that we're including all of the key data collection factors. I know your staff has reached out to us before about helping collect some of that. Our general rule of thumb is anywhere between 6 months to a year, start to finish, but that just really depends on how extensive the scope of work is, and we'll develop that with your staff.
Will we be including Palos and Gustine?
We can. I was looking for the eager nods. Yes.
Santanella?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, I'm just talking about Los Banos. I have no idea what's in Gustine, Dos Palos, and Santanella. And there are probably a ton that we could, I don't think one bus is going to suffice, but, we'll see from there. So.
I know, and I've had further discussions with San Joaquin's and ACE, and they're looking forward to working with us on that as well. And I think we've had further discussion and starting it here in Merced early in the morning to get over the hill and into Santa Clara.
Through, what's the route? It would be 152 or 99?
We haven't even got to that.
We haven't gotten
yes.
that far?
Yeah.
So you're thinking of putting in a bus here from Merced?
Well, this is the starting point anyway.
Uh-huh. Oh.
Right.
Oh, Jesus, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's 17,500 people. This was as of 4 years ago commuting north alone out of.
So I'm thinking they could go down
The Bay
140 and then 152, stop in Dos Palos or on the Y there, and we could do a lot. So yeah, let's make that happen. Thank you. Okay.
Any further questions? I heard a button. Nobody? Oh, that was yours. Okay. Nav, I think we'll move on to number 9, local transportation funding, LTF primer.
Thank you. So this is the first of a series of staff reports to be presented throughout the end of the calendar year, leading to development of approval for a transit reserve policy. This item is intended to inform the board of a history and eligible use of LTF funds per state law. LTF funds are derived from a quarter-cent sales tax that is collected statewide and must be used according with the TDA, or Transportation Development Act. LTF can be used for a variety of things, including planning, pedestrian, bike, bus, rail. For counties with a population under 500,000, like Merced County, LTF may be used for local streets and roads and construction and maintenance as well, and provide once all unmet transit needs have been provided. If the unmet transit needs are identified and are reasonable to meet, these needs must be addressed before the LTF funds are expended for non-transit use, such as streets and roads. If we go on and look on page 22 of the governing board packet, the PUC code, that's a public utility identifying the following priority orders for LTF funds. So number 1 is a TDA administrator, the county and the auditor and MCAG cost to administrate the LTF and perform the unmet needs process. Number 2 is basically planning and programming. MCAG usually takes 3% of the total planning working program purpose, for example, local match grant and federal funding within the necessary needs. The third item is basically pedestrian and bicycle facilities. You can use up to 2% of your whatever is left over of the LTF remaining. The fourth basically is, going down this is for rail and passenger service. If you see the long-term planning, that's actually earmarked for like San Diego COG, so we're not eligible to do long-term planning under LTF. So basically, transit, public transportation, that's where transit gets their money. It's the 7th on the priority list. As you can see, rail is also there, and then 8 is the final, which is streets and roads. So any questions? Oh, so if you go to the next page, page 24, that is the history of how the funds has been allocated for the last 5 to 6 years. Any questions?
Yes, Director Lohr.
Thank you. No question, but a comment. Thank you for providing this because it was helpful to me to see it black and white, and then more importantly, it was great for our community to see and have a better understanding of what it is and what we're doing and how it fits into what we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Nav, you're getting off easy. So we'll move on to number 10, Merced College transportation fee, information only.
So some good news. The associated student of Merced College and Merced College voted in favor of the transportation fee, which will be paid by student each semester in exchange for unlimited access to the fixed route public transit system in Merced County. I know the previous transit director brought in staff oral report back in May indicating that when they voted, it narrowly missed the mark of being passed. So given the narrow margin, Merced College administrator and the TJPA staff thought it would be useful to provide education to students about the benefits of transportation fees. The good thing is, after all the education and will be provided, it passed by 62%. I mean, it failed by 6%. So now, this is good deal news. So the goal is to provide service starting in spring semester, but we have our fingers crossed. We just met with them today. All signs look like we could be able to do it in spring, but bearing any hiccups so we might occur. So any questions?
Any questions?
62%.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nav. Now we'll move on to number 11. This is an action item. Action on property damage claim CSAA as G of Marquez. Is Christina here? There she is.
Good afternoon. Yes, so we are recommending that this be rejected. It is something that National Express would handle if valid. So it would actually be a claim that we would process through MCAG or TJPA.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for Christina? Seeing none. Further comments on this? What's the pleasure of the board?
Move to reject. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? I open this up for the public. I think that's all staff out there, but
This is not a public discussion.
it's not a public discussion. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Now we'll move into the Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority. And do you want to, Stacy, did you have something you want to say before we move to item number 12?
I'm going to pull executive director privilege here and embarrass Marty thoroughly because this is his, you may be seeing less of him, although I will encourage him to stay as involved as possible. He's not going anywhere, but I just want to publicly recognize him and thank him for the tremendous job that he did leading our WYA over the last couple of months. I think it was no surprise that he was completely capable of the job, and he did not disappoint. So I know I got much better sleep over these last few months having Marty at the helm, helping me navigate some of these difficult issues. So I just wanted to say thank you to Marty.
Thank you. And you did.
Thank you, Marty. So are you ready now? We'll move to number 12, Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority Monthly Update. This is an information item.
Great. A number of things to go over. I know we got a lot on the agenda today, so I'll go as fast as I can. First thing I want to do is introduce our new director, Eric Zetz. I've known Eric for about 10 years through SWANA, and I can tell you we could not have picked a better candidate for this. Eric, you want to come up and give a background?
Thank you, Marty. And hello, I'm Eric Zetz. Sorry, didn't mean to jump out so quickly on that. I've known Marty for 10 years. It's a pleasure to work for Stacy, and happy to be here to work for all of you. So a little bit about my background. I've just come as division manager from the city of Sunnyvale. I was just working on some project procurements with trying to secure different partnerships with our Sunnyvale smart station, the recycling MRF that's there, as well as hauling contracts with many of the haulers. And so I'm very much aware of some of the agencies that we can potentially have some business ties with, and hopeful to bring that here. I should point out there are a couple things. I did send out yesterday at the TRB meeting notices, and let me back up. There's a new law in the state of California. It's Senate Bill 1383. It is pushing organics diversion. It is the short-lived climate pollutants. The whole state is having to deal with this right now, and this has been in place since 2016. So I'm very much a part of that legislation. I sit as the chair on the legislative task force for SWANA, and so we put together a 30-item comment page to this. With that, we sent out, with Stacy's approval, letters that went out to 6 city managers, 1 CEO yesterday, both at the TRB meeting. It was handed to them, as well electronically given to them by email. And really the purpose of this is that we have contracted with HF&H. They are a phenomenal contractor. You guys are well served with that group. They are also, if you don't know, tasked by the state of, or by CalRecycle rather, to put together a model ordinance for municipalities to use. HF&H has put together an assessment. They're going to look at 1383. We're trying to get data from all of the agencies to find out where gaps exist with the new law. So just be a heads up that those letters have gone out yesterday to the various city managers and CEOs, with hope that within 30 days their staff could get that information to us and we can do an assessment. Secondly, I am aware of a complaint that came at a County of Merced meeting, and so we are looking into that complaint right now. We're looking into making sure we address some of the concerns that were put up there, and I'll work with Marty and Stacy, and we'll come back to this board with some information on that. Any questions for me?
Yes, Director Villalta.
So in a year, is it, Stacy, that the new contracts or the new the haulers or the dump tipping fees have to go out? And when that happens, what we're doing now, like some cities are collecting green waste and just trash, and other cities are doing recycling, and now we're going to have to do organic recycling or whatever. Do all of us have to comply with the same regs in every city depending upon the size?
I'm going to defer to Eric. He'll know much more about this. Yeah. It's so nice to be able to do that. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yes, the answer is yes. The state is going to come to each individual jurisdiction and ask for compliance. Mm-hmm. And so what we would be looking to do, from my perspective, is to provide each jurisdiction with a gap analysis that tells you exactly where your jurisdiction's at as it relates to the law. Identify what those gaps are and make resolves to respond to those gaps. I will tell you that one of the requests on this request for information, this RFI, is that we identify your hauling agreements, your contracts, and so that we can look at those contracts and find when they come up for renewal where we can make improvements so that this law is spoken to in those captures, if you will. With that, I will tell you I'm very versed with the City of Clovis. I put together their franchise agreement. We were just working on with the City of Sunnyvale's franchise hauling agreement, and I think the latest and greatest that's just come out is it escapes me. I apologize. It's San Ramon. So San Ramon's hauling agreement is the one to follow right now. So, and that's out there. You can look for it. HF&H actually put it together, and it speaks to language that has 1383 in it in the contracts. But again, we're here to help. At the same token, this is a big onus for our haulers. Our haulers have a big part in this, and so they have been involved in these interactions.
So Los Banos selected a consultant, and we're working on that now. So if you could, as soon as you are ready, could you please contact Mark Fachin, our Public Works Department and Director, and just let him know and introduce yourself, so we can make sure that the contract that we're negotiating is the one that needs to be negotiated.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Director Murphy.
Eric, I just wanted to welcome you to the team.
Thank you.
Welcome to MCAG, and I think it's a great opportunity, especially in your profession. I think we've got some really interesting projects happening, so look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to welcome him to the team. Hi, Eric. I'm Lloyd. Welcome. And I live on North Highway 59, so I drive by every day. If you want me to bring you coffee, let me know.
Well, we just had our litter pickup on Highway 59. Hopefully, as you drive home tonight, you'll notice that it's clean. But yeah, we're working to make sure that we're a good steward of that land as well. Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
I just want to add one thing that wasn't mentioned is that both Marty and Eric are working on an analysis of the request the board made last month to consider the cost of extending the operating hours at the landfill. So that's something that will come as a future discussion item.
Thank you.
That's something we're hearing in Atwater a lot lately. So,
Thank you. Like I said,
so Marty, you back on now?
Yeah.
You ready to do the presentation?
We picked a good one there, so we got a good one. A couple more quick updates. We'll be on the 6B liner. I got a couple pictures on that, and an unaudited financial summary also. And then I got a speaker here from the UC that would like to state on the UC's project. Here's a picture of the 6B project. It shows us putting down a 1-foot layer of gravel out there, and this picture was taken about a week ago, so we're over halfway done with the whole cell right now, and it should be done in a couple of weeks. After that goes down, you can see the fabric that goes across it, and then on top of that goes another 2 foot of dirt, and that's what we will actually be working on whenever the cell is opened up. Again, this picture was taken about a week ago. I just saw a picture on my way over here where the dirt is over halfway over both sides of the cell here. So a couple more weeks and we should be done doing all the bottom work on the cell. The project is still on budget. It is a little bit behind time. We're looking at about another 2 weeks in the middle of November for it to be completed. This is an unaudited financial summary. Like Stacy said, I've been doing this for a few months now, and I realize we haven't really showed you guys any financials over that period of time, so I wanted to come up with something really, really quick and easy. We did have the auditors out for 2 days 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, and they will be doing a audited version of this coming out in December. And so this is what we've known prior to that. We took in 17.1 in the fiscal year 18-19. Our expenses were 12.6, and we profited 4.5. That also expenses also includes our bond payment for 2.1 for this year already.
That does include bond payment.
Next, I would like to introduce Tibor Toth. He's our Assistant Vice Chancellor of the Facilities Management. He works for the UC, and he wants to give a presentation on the landfill gas to energy project from the UC's perspective.
Perfect. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Hi, my name is Tibor Toth. I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Facilities Management at UC Merced. I've been there for approximately 10 years. Prior to that, I was at Hilmar Cheese Company. Prior to that, Gallo Winery. So been in the Valley with me and my family for close to 30 years, and we're thrilled to be here. So when I first joined UC Merced 10 odd years ago, it was really amazing to see how focused we were on being able to develop alternative energy sources for the campus that would help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And we've initiated a number of programs. Not only do we have high efficiency buildings, but we've also have 2 power purchase agreements, PPAs for short, for solar power. So we have approximately 5 megawatts of electricity coming in through solar power, a ground-mounted version, a building-mounted version, as well as a parking lot version. And during those whole discussions, we talked about internally about the need to really look at a biogas solution. And so we've been looking at fuel cells, a number of other turbine oxidizer technologies. And it was about 5-6 years ago that we began conversations with RWA in which they had a desire to be able to find a source of their biogas energy. And it was like manna from heaven for us. Here's a great opportunity for us to be able to utilize biogas. And the neat thing about this that we can't do with solar is not only can we derive electrical energy out of biogas, but we can also use heat energy as well. So not only are we reducing our electrical, the emissions due to electrical energy, but also due to the natural gas that we're also burning for our water boilers as well. So we view this as a wonderful opportunity not just to reduce our carbon footprint, but it's an also great benefit for the university because we're now diversifying our energy portfolio. And another segment that's really important to me personally as well as professionally is to allow the students to be able to see technology in action. I personally am a mechanical engineer, major motorhead. I love the entire power generation industry. And one thing that a lot of universities aren't able to do is to be able to provide hands-on experience for students. So it's one thing to learn about in a classroom, it's something else for the students to actually be able to walk through our central plant, actually see a boiler, actually look at the power generation. And so we're very excited about it. We've had a site identified for this project. We actually have electrical panels that we have dedicated for a future cogeneration plant, which is what this in effect is. And we recognize what the PPA process is about. And there is an upfront capital cost that you guys have to be prepared for with a long-term gain of a committed customer that would be able to make payments on electrical energy. It's a model that we've used before. It's a model we're very, very familiar with, and we cannot wait to partner with you to actually turn this into a reality.
Very good. Yes, Mr. Silvera.
So I'm guessing you're here to express your enthusiasm because probably it was reported back to you that at the last meeting there was a little bit of reservation on our part, and I agree with you. I think that really that's the hidden value is the ability to take people and give them hands-on experience. You can sit behind a desk and look at a computer, but for some people, being a visual learner is very important to them. So I'm willing to go down the road with you, but at the end of the day, I got to answer it to my constituents. And, you know, what was kind of promised in the beginning that this deal is going to be, you know, there's going to be, it's going to generate some revenue. It's going to help us offset other costs. When we kind of dive down into it, the numbers get really, really small, at least where we currently were. I'm of the camp that we're kind of at that breaking point. We're already invested in this deal, and do we invest a little bit more to find out if there's actually something there, or do we play it safe and do we just cut our losses and say, nope, we're not going to do this? Because what was promised kind of in the beginning to what is becoming a reality now, to me, if those numbers equate out, the risk is not worth the reward. But listening to you talk about the other values of it, just not the cost of it, but the other values, and as long as the university is willing to consider that when we have the discussions on the power purchase agreement, I think we could have a really great partnership.
Is it okay if I add something to that?
Yes, absolutely.
An aspect here that we recognize during the study, planning, and design process is the number of unknowns. And so we absolutely encourage and welcome the consulting team, the engineering teams to come down and look at our plant and look at what we've prepared for. And we're willing to meet with our architectural design group, with our fire marshal, our campus building official. So there is an entire transparent view as to what this project actually entails. And I personally would want this to be something that you and your constituents can say, this is the best thing that could be done at this point in time.
And that's, again, refreshing to hear, because this is the one thing, I love the university, and I think it brings so many great things to our community. But what we hear a lot of is well, universities don't do that. And my pushback to them is well, when's the last time we built a new UC? It's been how many years ago? We live in a different world today than we did. I don't know. I don't know the number. Maybe somebody does. The last time we built a UC in the state of California, we're the new shining example. And so let's think of it that way. Let's think of, yeah, well, that's just because they did it that way 30 years ago. That doesn't mean that we can't work together and have different kind of partnerships now. And so I appreciate hearing you say that.
Thank you, Director Silvera. Is there anybody else that has any questions? I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tibor. I'm ready for any questions.
Any other questions? Seeing none. That's how you do it. You stack the deck, you don't get any questions.
All right, thank you.
Very good. Now we'll move on to item number 13. Action on property damage claim, Alejandro Ponce. And Christina, you're up again.
Here. So yes, so we are recommending that this be rejected on a couple of bases. Administratively, the amounts that were requested initially don't match up to the itemized amounts, and then there was no receipts or estimates included as was required by the form itself. And on the other note, I did have a chance to speak with the site supervisor at Billy Wright, and he explained that with this particular incident, the gentleman did not stop when instructed to stop and went into softer ground. But on top of that, this is a frequent customer, and they've recognized that the vehicle that they use to dump regularly has a lower bumper that doesn't have the clearance that typical trucks would have for this purpose. So it's going to be a routine problem because of the vehicle and model and the way it's set up. So with that said, we do recommend that this be rejected.
Any questions? Seeing none, I will, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move to reject.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposition? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. Now we'll move into Merced County Association of Governments. Number 14, Caltrans report, Mr. Tom Dumas.
How's everybody? Just a few quick things. The 99 northbound Livingston project, they opened the bids in September, and lo and behold, they were actually 5% under what they projected, and they're looking at making an award here in the next week or so. So they'll probably have a groundbreaking event in January of 2020 when they get that squared away.
On a nice sunny day.
You know, I'd like to say that, but I'd really like a lot of rain during January, so I'm kind of tossed. City of Atwater, the 99 rehab job they've got going there, those bids should be open here in the next week or two. That's looking at also doing resurfacing and adding about 1,250 feet long decel lanes to the ramps. That also, if things work out right, they hope to have that awarded by January 2.
Oh, wow.
Intersection 59 in Santa Fe, one of everybody's favorite. It did get put on hold for a little while. They were waiting on signal poles to be delivered. Evidently, there's not a lot of manufacturers of these poles, and they got held up. But my understanding is the poles showed up, but they had to make another modification, but they'll get back onto it. And they expect construction on that to be finished in the next 2 or 3 weeks. 165 in Gear. There was a discussion on whether or not we could do something in Hillmar, and they've done the traffic study reviews, and it met the signal warrants, and they're going to move forward with that project and see about trying to signalize that. And other than that, before the meeting, I handed out a little flyer on our climate forum. we invite you all to attend that. If you have any questions on it, please give me a call or contact Ken, like it says on the form. I don't mind you calling him directly either. But that's all the news I have today. Any questions?
Just if I could clarify that the event we talk about for January of 2020, you might have received a previous invite for an October date, so those are the same events, so the October date isn't happening. And I want to thank Caltrans for our continued partnership on co-hosting our DBE workshop that's coming up November 15th. I sent that out in my update, and if anyone needs any additional information. And also, I understand we have a partnership meeting with the district and the county on Highway 140 coming up as well.
I don't think I have that date, but that one is being worked through the executive office, but yes.
And the workshop is
Sure.
Oh, sure. Supervisor Pereira?
So a couple things. First, thank you for the update on gear. And then also, as I came into the meeting today, I took the Martin Luther King exit, southbound exit. And probably 9 months ago, I had mentioned that, it was getting alligatored, and you guys came in and kind of patched it a little bit.
Huh?
And then I didn't even realize it, but you come in and you redid the whole thing, and it just looks really nice, and appreciate that.
I'll let them know. Thank you.
And then the other final question, when we looked with the staff in Hillmar, we also looked at the intersection of August and 165 or Lander, generally on the eastbound side where there's flooding. And so is there any update on that part, or?
All I had was the signalization and the them doing the lights, but I don't recall them talking about flooding. But I'll check on that. That's at Lander and
August. The county paved up within probably about 200 feet of Lander, and we left it because, Caltrans has some underground sensors and that kind of stuff. And anyways, and it floods. So that was, at the meeting we had at Hillmar High School, that was one of the topics brought up.
I have them give it a check.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Villalta.
Tom, I just want to kind of bring you up to date. In the last week and a half, we've had 4 multi-car collisions on 152. And I asked the police chief for the stats. We're up to 34% of all the crashes that happen in Los Banos happen on 152 within our city. And so now it's not a matter of what we're going to do. It's a matter of when we're going to do it. Because I don't know how to respond to the citizens anymore with what's happening. I mean, the ambulances can't get through on 152. People try to move over their businesses, and now it's becoming a real safety hazard. So, I'm glad to see the Pioneer widening, but this is not something that we can wait years and years and years for. So I'm asking for your assistance, because I don't know what we're going to do with over 42,000 cars going through our town right now. So, and check my stats if you want. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to item number 15, information discussion only. This is A through F. These are information items that have been provided. Are there any questions or clarification? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to the consent agenda. This is an action item. This is A, B, and C. Yes, Director Villalta.
We'll get our money back, right, Stacy? For the money that we're lending.
On the CMAC exchange, yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Without an exchange, we'd be more at risk of losing the money.
Right.
To approve.
I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Pereira was the second. Murphy was the first. Any comments from the public? Please line up to the right and with a single file line. Seeing none, we'll bring it back here to the dais. Is there any further comments? I have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to number 17. This is our transportation planning and Measure V updates, information only. Stacy Guzman, as it's
Yes. You would think. But no, his family chooses to say Guzman. But I accept Guzman. It's my preference, but you know, I've only had the name for 2 weeks, so I don't get a vote yet.
Well, I know your husband, and he says Guzman.
He says Guzman. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be brief. The items that I was prepared to talk about have been addressed in one way or another in earlier discussion. I just want to make a quick note that the reason why Matt's not here is that he was accepted into the second class of the CalCog Carl program. That's the California Academy for Regional Leaders. And over the next 6 months, he'll do 6 two-day convenings of professionals that many of which aren't quite at the executive director level, but many are eyeing either deputy positions or ways to just transition a career of information into the next leadership role. It was a great program last year, so he's there today and tomorrow, and it's kind of what we heard from Tibor at the university about doing the field exhibits and seeing projects firsthand, and not just reading and learning from a book, but learning from people who have walked the path and seeing the projects either while they're being built or how they're being built and how the leadership came around making some of those projects happen. So really excited for him. I don't anticipate he'll miss many, but this was one meeting that did conflict with that schedule.
Thank you, Mrs. Guzman. Is there any further questions or comments on this item? Then we'll move to 18, Measure V Citizens Oversight Committee appointment. This is an action item. Mary Michael Rawlings.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As you'll recall in your last meeting, you decided to appoint a subcommittee of your board to make a recommendation on the open seat on the Measure V Citizens Oversight Committee for the representative from a bicycle, pedestrian, and transit advocacy group. The subcommittee met and is nominating Mr. Robert Morse for your consideration today. And so that is the action before you. His application and resume is starts on page 185. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if any of the subcommittee would like to make any additions to what the discussion was during your meeting, be happy to have that.
Mr. Oliveira.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we met, and both candidates very well qualified, and I think we did talk that the next time an opening comes up, the other candidate should definitely, I don't even think we'd have to interview if she's been through the process already, and she is eminently qualified to do it, but so is Mr. Morse. And one of the committee members had personal knowledge of him, so that's the way we went. And hopefully she does come back because she has good credentials. Thank you.
I have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Second. Is there further comments or questions? Questions from the public? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mary. We'll move on to item 19. This is a public hearing, draft regional transportation improvement program. This is an action item. Stacy?
I just want to clarify that the action here is to open a public hearing. There's no action on the document itself. And so if the chair wishes, I can provide a summary of the document. Unless there's any questions, I can walk through. I guess the super summary is that this document is a reflection of the direction that we've received from the board, starting with the workshop in August and at the board discussion in September. The draft document was released October 17th, and comments are due November 18th. And the summary of what is captured in this document is three components: programming, $204,000 of the planning funds, the planning, programming, monitoring funding for our planning activities, programming, the $29.6 million in FY 24-25 to the construction of AME Phase 1B, and the policy language establishing Pioneer Road Widening Program as the priority for the remaining and subsequent RTIP STIP funds. That's a super summary that I'm happy to answer questions or go to whatever detail the board or the public would like.
Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing.
One more thing. We did find, Joy handed out a page, page 1. It was an error. The TRB and the public document was accurate, but in the transmission into this, page 1 of the RTIP was cut off at the bottom, the last paragraph. So the public document, the TRB document were accurate. You have a handout of the copy. It looks just like this. It says overview and schedule, and the description of Pioneer Road widening was cut off in your printed packets. So that correction has been made, and I can tell you on the page that is on 196 of your packet. So you have a hard copy in front of you, but all of the other versions did not have the cutoff. Now I'm really done.
Stacy, you're done now? Mm-hmm. At this time, we'll open up the public hearing. Anybody would like to speak on this? At this time, I will close the public hearing. Thank you. Then we'll, what's that? At this time, we'll move on to item number 20. And the action was the public hearing, correct? So we'll move on to item 20, Pioneer Road Widening Project Funding Options. Information item. Stacy.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the August workshop and at the September Governing Board meeting, staff received direction to examine other funding sources that might be used to help deliver the Pioneer Road Widening Project. This project is programmed in the Measure V implementation plan, I think with about $8.5 million of West Side Regional Projects funding for phases up to and including right-of-way, but the project does not have construction funding, which is estimated by Los Banos to be $36.4 million. So the goal of this agenda item is to provide an overview of the funding sources that are within the authority of the MCAG Governing Board that could be considered for programming at future decision points in time towards this project. It is important to note, though, that as we talk about these funding sources, that each of them have their own cycle. So if the board were to take action, let's say next month, it would be in the form of what we call a policy statement, an intention to look at funding sources for a project. It wouldn't be until these funding source cycles came up for programming, like we're in right now on the RTIP, that you would actually be able to commit a funding amount from a program to a project. So I know that gets a little wonky, but it's an important distinction, and this chart will help make sense of that, I promise. As you know, in the draft RTIP, Pioneer is established as the priority project for all subsequent RTIP money, and RTIP and STIP should be synonymous for our purposes, which includes all the capacity of the next cycle. We do anticipate $5.4 million or more of RTIP capacity in the next cycle. And of course, I've mentioned the right-of-way funding that's already been programmed for West Side Measure V regional dollars. So of the $36 million shortfall, the project is currently in its PSR phase, so when that's completed, it will help inform a project scope, cost, schedule, particularly whether or not phasing, how that might be able to be an approach to deliver this project. So in considering how to develop what we would call seed money for construction, in addition to the future cycle of future cycles of RTIP, we took a look at what are the sources of funding that come before this board. board. Sometimes, as you can see in the chart under the decision-making column, it does have a subsequent action. So like this with the RTIP, it does require final approval of the CTC, as does LPP. And then, of course, the two measure funds would require involvement with the West Side RPC as well. So when staff looked at kind of the funding sources that are within MCAG's authority, we identified between now and the next RTIP cycle there being about a $7 million potential. I mentioned the 5.4 of next cycle RIP. There's set aside money on the west side, measure V, that is about $500,000 a year. That would be about a $4 million estimate by the 2025. But I really want to focus on the local partnership funds and the highway infrastructure improvement and CMAQ. This is like alphabet soup. But let's start with the local partnership program formula. So the local partnership program is a new program that a lot of folks identify as the incentive program for self-help counties. It was something that was designed to reward counties who had self-help measures. There's two parts. Half of it goes to projects on a competitive basis, and half goes on a formula basis. So on a formula basis, we currently receive about $600,000 a year. You may recall that this funding source in the first year was part of the swap arrangement that we had among the jurisdictions on dissolving the RTIF. Some communities took LPP. Some took RTIF funds, so, but that in the tune of about $600,000 a year is at the discretion of the MCAG Governing Board moving forward. And by the 2025 year, there could be, on the basis that they have now on the formula, it would be about a $3 million accumulation. Now, that's not to say we wait till 2025 to spend $3 million. You want to use this fund as it comes, and there is a match. So this potentially could be the type of funding source that could offset existing expenditures from the Measure V regional pot. So let's say hypothetically with the Pioneer, if it's a 50-50 match, you could use half as much Measure V money that's already allocated and push that out for construction, because that's the most flexible, and use the LPP right now for the project development. So it would be an infusion of dollars now to offset the use of measure money later for construction. The other is the Highway Infrastructure Program. We call it HIP. It's a new federal funding source, and federal is key because you would want to make this, and one of the difficulties of using this funding is that it needs to be on a federalized project. We actually have $1.6 million available right now for programming. There hasn't been discussion at this board yet about any kind of a policy of how we want to approach spending that money, but that is the only existing funding source up there, aside from the RTIP, that it has capacity to program right now. And these funds are fairly flexible: pre-construction, construction, rehabilitation, preservation, so as long as the facility is on the federal aid system. And then the last would be CMAQ. So CMAQ is also federal. You all should be very familiar. It's for projects that help improve our air quality. We get about $3.5 million a year. We have historically issued a call for projects. If there were any type of a policy statement on a particular project for CMAQ, there could be a dollar amount that could be taken off the top for that project, with the remaining balance left for a call for projects. There's a number of ways you could approach it. But the important part here is that CMAQ could only fund air quality improving components of a project. So if there were sidewalks or bike lanes, roundabouts, things like that. So in this case, Pioneer would have, and I understand that the intention is to have air quality improving components of the project that could be eligible for CMAQ at a future date.
I think the whole project is air quality.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So there's no...
Yep. So at this time, this is an information item. I know there's a lot of acronyms and stuff up on that chart, but really what I wanted to show is if you look at the policy or direction for programming column, that is a snapshot of whether or not staff right now has any policy in place dictating how we bring board items on these funding sources. So for example, next RTIP cycle,
If this current RTIP is approved, you will see a staff recommendation at the onset of that process that says, based on previous direction, we are recommending that you program this balance to Pioneer, because you've already provided that direction. The same for CMAQ. We have policy that dictates how we proceed with staff recommendations and board action on CMAQ projects. It does not exist for HIP, and it does not exist for LPP. So as I mentioned, because LPP is not available for programming until next year, any intention of using that funding for any specific project at this point would be an expression of intent versus like a policy statement, versus HIP, that can actually come back as an actionable programming request, meaning there's $1.6 million that could be programmed right now for a particular project. So the board direction I'd be seeking can be a spectrum of things. There's no additional action to be taken from staff without direction today. It could be a policy statement draft. It could be a programming request. Next month, it could be a wide variety. So I know that's a lot, but there's a lot here that can be discussed.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Stacy, on the HIP funding, that's federal money, correct?
Correct.
So in order to be eligible for federal money, you need to have NEPA, correct?
You are federalized as soon as you spend a federal dollar on a project, but it will require, when you get to environmental, to complete NEPA.
Okay, I just want...
It's not a condition to be federal, but it's a condition of being federal. Once you receive $1 of federal money, which Pioneer is, because there was we just repurposed the earmark, I know, which was federal, but I can't remember the initial federal dollar that went to Pioneer, but it will be required to complete NEPA.
Mayor, if you could, or Director Vololta, I'm sorry, make sure you pass that along to the staff in Los Banos that it's going to be required to have NEPA as well. And I only say that because of a side conversation where they weren't sure. So.
Director Volta, you want to use my
comment?
No, I'm good.
Anybody else?
No.
So, what I'd like to do at this time, if my phone comes on, is I'd like to move that staff be given direction to develop recommendations to identify Pioneer widening as a priority for the use of funding sources included in this staff report, and that the staff also be directed to identify potential funding sources for this project. The success of this project is basically going to depend on other projects and not have Pioneer be negatively impacted by other projects, because we need to work together. We pared this down from $500 million with a B, and that's why the bypass was doomed all these years, is because it got up to $490 million. That would have taken the STIP money for probably the next 20, 30, 40 years, and that wasn't going to happen. The other funding sources identified, we're not here to break the bank on anything, but as I explained to Mr. Dumas, that this project now is, somebody has to be the parent on this project, and it needs to get done, however the funding combination occurs. The STIP money that's available now was basically for the bypass, and the bypass is not a project anymore, it's a second-tier project. So we pared it down to a $45 million project, which is very doable with the monies that we have. So again, we're not looking to negatively impact, and we're not looking to have our project negatively impacted by other projects. So again, the statement that I read, and I'll read it again, I move that staff be given direction to develop recommendations to identify Pioneer Road widening as a priority for the use of funding sources included in the staff report, and that also staff be directed to identify potential funding sources for this project. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I would gladly second that motion with, as long as you'll accept one little change in there, is also that the city of Los Banos will look for, if it's for all funding sources, that includes funding sources from within the city of Los Banos as well.
Agreed.
Okay, I'll second it.
So this was
Point of information.
Yeah.
So this is an info item, and so why are we taking action on it?
Well, there's no action to be taken, but there is direction
For staff?
for staff.
Isn't that an action?
This is not an action item, so it's not. I think staff can certainly hear what the board's intentions are, and it sounded to me like they already were moving in that direction.
Right.
That's editorial, and I shouldn't do that, but.
That was my opinion too,
So then can I consider that direction to staff from this body?
I think you need to take a vote on it. I mean, I think if you just change it to, you're not making you're just giving staff direction. I don't know if that, it isn't an
I can't do it alone, so I'm just trying to say, I mean, of what I just read, the members of this body, are you okay with that? Is there anyone who is not?
yeah. Supervisor Laura.
Thank you. I'd like more information on what other projects are in Los Banos or on the west side. And this is to gauge, for me to gauge where Pioneer is in that list of projects. So when folks ask me, why are we voting on Pioneer, I can say, these are the projects, and this is the priority level that the community identified, or the decision makers identified that Pioneer is a top priority versus project B, C, and D. Does that make sense?
Well, we funded the other two projects. We're, Stacy?
Yeah, if I could, because I guess what I will suggest is staff will make the statement that we will bring back actionable items for the board's consideration in the future, since this isn't a motion to be made. So I'm hearing this and we'll digest. But to Director Lohr's point, I think what also could be helpful is, with the absence of having any board list of priority projects, which we don't have as an agency, staff it looks to the regional projects on the east and west side on the Measure V implementation plan. So we can include, when we bring an item for discussion and potential action next, to include a review of what those projects have been on the west side and what remains, because it does go out a little further. And that would probably give the best snapshot of where the investments have been made and what remains on the west side. Does that meet what you were interested in?
Yes, thank you. And the need for that too is the community is not going to know how to tie Pioneer to Measure V or to any of other to this.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
If I might?
Sure.
Yes, the Regional West Side Committee has already programmed $8.75 million for the purchase of land, and also for right-of-way acquisition and engineering, and that's already been approved. So we have money that we've put forward this, plus local money that we're putting forth towards this project. So this is our project. This is our project. The other projects have been funded, and they are a bicycle path out to the college, and that's already going to be paid for. So we are. This is our project. There are no other projects.
So as far as direction, my direction is that in the past we have put a priority of projects on the west side, and then when those projects aren't ready for the funding that's available, I feel like this group gets beat up for stealing the money. And so, the Pioneer widening is not a project yet, right? It's a conception, it's idea. We've allocated the west side money, but until, it becomes a project, we can't fund it, right? So I'm just a little leery of saying we're going to spend all of our next dollars that are available on Pioneer when we don't know what's going to happen with, City of Los Banos is directing this project, and they've got to develop the project to the point to where it's fundable, And until then, I think staff direction working towards funding options for Pioneer is fine with me, but I'm not committing to my vote today on what I would do in the future. I'm going to see what the knowledge is at that time, and that's me.
So I think, thank you. I think that I feel like I have good direction. I think what I was really looking for was if there was any commentary, I guess, opposite of what this would suggest. If someone said absolutely not, or let's do something else completely. So absent needing a motion, I feel like we are able to put together options of how to move forward that the board can discuss and consider that can include both policy and more information around the list of projects. We can also take into consideration the timeline of the completion of the PSR in relation to the commitment of the RTIP and how these other funding sources fall into play. So I'm comfortable with the level of direction unless there's anything in addition. I was just most likely, I wanted to articulate that based on the direction we have, this was the end of the road in terms of what staff had been directed to do, and we can continue down this path unless there was an objection, and it sounds like there isn't. Okay.
Yes, Director Volta.
Yes, thank you. Again, we're looking to establish that this is our priority project. This is what we want, and for the amount of money that's being it's going to be expended on this. And again, the West Side Regional Committee committed $8.75 million, and that's where that money's going to go. If that money doesn't go to that money is reprogrammed. We all understand that. And that's why establishing this as a priority project, that's why I'm asking for direction to establish that. And with the other funding sources holding the STIP money, $5.6 million, if it doesn't become a project, the money cannot stay. It's not programmed. It's just holding the money for that project. And if that project comes to fruition, then we're going to have the money to build it. And we need that to get it done in order to alleviate what's happening on Pioneer right now. Excuse me, on 152 right now. If the PSR, when we finish that PSR, we've got a project, and we've already hired an engineering firm to do the PSR, and we're going to expedite it and have that ready between 8 to 12 months. So we're doing our part. We've already spent the money to do this. We're committed to this project, and I don't hear anything negatively here today, unless I'm wrong, that you're not committed to this either if it becomes a project. Thank you.
We are committed. Is there any further comments? Stacy, do you have anything to add?
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to item number 21, the 2020 One Voice Program Development. This is an action item.
What's the new development?
Mary Michael. Oh, there, now you're on. Sorry.
Thank you. It is that time again. I can't believe it already to talk about One Voice. It feels like we just got back from DC. But yet here we are. The 2020 One Voice program is currently scheduled for May 5 through 8. So it's after the May Day Fair, Mr. Silvera. We remembered that, and we've looked at all the calendars and so on and so forth. So as you'll recall, the board gave the agency direction on some new program guidelines after the 2018 program, which were carried out under the 2019 program this year. And I know 3 of you here today were on that trip, so I will let you comment on that. But after the trip was over, we had a debrief meeting. We asked for some feedback online, and overall the delegation was very supportive of continuing under the new program guidelines, really thought that it produced a much more productive outcome, and trip logistics just went very smoothly, etc. It was my first trip. I thought it was a great experience, and we look forward to doing it again. The couple of items that we came back with from the delegation, and from what I understand from previous years, if that there was any changes that we were going to be making, it would be potentially to accommodation as well as paring down the planning process. And that had been done to some extent. We believe the lodging accommodation, we can certainly try something new this year, definitely open to doing that. And although this gives my boss some heartburn, we can definitely pare down the planning process as well to about 3 meetings. So we've outlined that on page 224 in your agenda at the top of the page. In order to get this down to about 3 or 4 meetings, we really would rely on the jurisdictions to get us back a lot of information before we started the meeting process, and that's all laid out. And in addition to that, we would propose that we continue the goals as per previous direction. You'll remember Yamilet's comment about the Citizens Advisory Committee suggesting that we add a representative from that group to be on the delegation. The staff recommendation did not include that. We were continuing with the guidance that the governing board had made previously, as well as what the delegation told us after the trip this year, but we're certainly open to whatever the governing board wants to do for 2020. We have Townsend Public Affairs under contract to help support the trip again this year, so we look forward to utilizing them and their continuity of knowledge on valley and regional issues. The delegate agreement is also included in your packet. It's the exact same as last year, so no surprises there. Happy to answer any questions you might have or defer to any of the delegates that participated in the trip this year if they have any comments.
Yes, Supervisor Laura.
Thank you. I was on the delegation, the last delegation, and I shared already in a previous meeting my thoughts about the program, but I'll quickly share them again. Real nice timeline, short, sweet. We got the meetings back to back. Townsend staff was excellent. Loved how staff planned everything, and we weren't late or anything. We were just on time. And I really liked the smaller, I haven't been on the previous delegations, but I did like the smaller groups, or the small groups that we were a part of. One of the questions that I did have is, if I sign up and the plane tickets bought, the hotels booked, and I miss the trip, that's a cost already on MCAG. Is there a way, or can we entertain something where the jurisdictions help us cover part of that cost?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So aside from the chair of the board, the agency doesn't pay for the travel for any of the other board members. The cost that would be incurred by the agency from a participant or a delegate that ended up not coming on the trip would be, largely it's the inconvenience of having to fill the speaking roles, but there are meals. There's the 2 dinner events that we have, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else. It's largely the logistical nightmare of, especially when we have short teams, small teams, 3 or 4 people, but in terms of the travel costs, those are incurred by the jurisdictions with the exception of the chair.
Okay, my bad memory then. Thank you.
Yes, Supervisor Oliveira, or not Supervisor, Director Oliveira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I thought I've been on quite a few of these, and I thought last year's was exceptionally well run. It was a lot easier with the smaller group. We didn't have to meet under stairways or out in the backyard. We all got in the offices. We had our points. And as one success we had, as a direct result of one of the meetings, we just got a grant for a $700,000 fire truck.
Right.
And that all started with the trip to DC. So it is worth it. So far, we've been lucky. We've got a city hall and a fire truck. And we'll go next year and we'll look for more. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other directors have any comments? So this is an action item. Is this?
Moved it up.
Okay. So I have a motion on the floor and a second. Do you get both of them? Laura was the motion, Oliveira was the second. Further discussion or questions? Anything from the public? I have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mary Michael. Now we'll move on to item number 22, was authorize agreement for construction of front office security upgrades. This is an action item. Nav Bragi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff is seeking board approval to enter into a contract for construction for front office security to make MCAG office more secure. The upgrade includes a ballistic door with hardware, ballistic window and a tray, along with access control hardware and ballistic sheeting in the wall and a metal frame for the door. You know, examples I can do incidents in the last couple months, in the back alleyway of our building, there's been a shooting. Even though it was after hours, if it was during the day, those people could just run into the building. We have homeless people coming in, try to use the restroom when we denied them. They get very aggressive. Just last month, we had a rider who came in disputing his suspension, and you know, he got very aggressive with our admin assistant. We called the police, and that's the only way he left the building. It's warranted, and it's, you know, I think Joy handed out a diagram of how the layout's going to be for the new security upgrade. Any questions?
Thank you, Nav. I think Director.
I just wanted to make an motion to go ahead and approve item number 22 for the front office security upgrades at the MCAG office.
So I have a motion, I have a second, and I have a comment by Director Lohr.
Just a question. Do we need all this lobby space?
So we are gonna put a monitor there for. Oh, we do, because we do have wheelchair people coming in to buy passes. So you need enough room for them to navigate in and out of the building. Also, what we're gonna do is actually have like decals of all our agencies and, you know, partner agencies in the lobby area, along with the monitor to display what events are going on within the county and the cities.
And I'll mention, you know, this is going to change the way the public interfaces with the agency. It's going to look very different. We tried to get the security that we needed at a low cost. So we've opted to do things like, instead of doing the whole wall with the ballistic window, it's going to be a window on a wall. So you'll have a wall where we have open air, and that counter will come out. And the other reason on the consideration of we're in an office where we're busting at the seams for space, in keeping not just the ADA accessibility for the front, but that's going to now be our only public entrance. So right now, over the last couple of years, we've had a separate entrance for the transit agency along K Street, and that has been maybe for the last two or 3 years. So once we have these improvements, that will be the only entrance. So it would double. It would essentially take both the foot traffic coming from transit and the foot traffic that's going through MCAG and putting it all through that one main door.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? I have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Just made Joy's life much. She's happy.
Yeah.
Just if I may. So I didn't hear it in the motion, and I should have said something before we voted, but was the motion for 115,000?
Not to
Is
exceed.
the requested action?
Not to exceed 115. So the bid came in at 103, but just in case there's any change orders or anything.
Did say for 115,000 in the motion, but I didn't say not to exceed, but I said 115,000.
Thank you for the clarification. This next item is number 23. I was called by Director Espinoza, who could not be here today. It was his request, since he's the one who brought this to the board, if we could put this off till next meeting.
Motion to continue.
Motion to continue? Second? I have a first and a second. Is there further discussion? All those all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition?
No.
So I have one opposition.
I will give you my explanation.
Sure.
I don't think that changing the meetings is going to do anything other than whoever decides to get the meeting changed, we're going to change it to a new time. They're going to rally the troops, and we're going to see them at one or potentially two meetings, and then we're going to be right back into the same boat where we're always, unless it's a real hot button issue, we're going to have 20-to-1 staff versus public. So I know that it's every so often these things come up to change the times of the meetings, and we want to try to be accessible. But again, you know, if it's something that you're passionate about, you'll find a way to make the meetings. So I thought I'd just let that be known.
Thank you, Director. So next we'll move on to item number 24, proposed agenda item for consideration, status of MCAG Joint Powers Authority JPA agreement. So we have, I'll open it up for discussion. This is an action item.
I got a question. So I don't know. I don't think I was at the meeting where this got placed on the agenda, and I know we postponed it last time just due to time constraints. So the question that I would like asked or answered is, what are we trying to accomplish with this item? That's ultimately what is the end game? What is the goal of this item? It seems to me, in what I've read, that there maybe was some language issues on it. It seems, from what I know, and I can only go off of the current set of bylaws that I had, every time an adjustment was made to the bylaws for whatever reason, they always kind of put a 10-year sunset on it. So whenever they did it, there would be a 10-year sunset added to the end of it. And everybody, I think it was voted on unanimously at the meeting where it was approved. And so is the point to kind of say, is it a gotcha moment? We gotcha. You messed something up, and so we want to make sure that we point that out to everybody, or is the goal to correct the mistakes and move forward, or is it the goal to say that MCAG doesn't exist anymore? I guess if someone could clarify what exactly we're trying to accomplish here, that would be really great for me, because if somebody has another reason that they want to see this, you know, to go further to discuss, I would love to hear that. Otherwise, let's make the corrections to the few language changes and move on. That would be my suggestion, but I'm just curious to see what are we trying to get done?
Thank you, Director Silvera. Yes.
Yeah.
Director Villalta.
Yes. For me, it would be making the corrections. But in the process, as I looked at the forward from the attorney, I couldn't really. There was one line in there that said it was okay and it was totally valid. But by releasing that memo, I'm just curious as to why we can't release on a limited basis the backup memo that came from the attorney that's considered attorney-client privilege. So we can review that and have our attorneys review it to make sure that if we move forward that information is correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that was a decision made in consultation with the attorney who prepared it and myself. So I'll give a bit of a background. And the hesitation was primarily that this issue has not come to this board yet. So the history of it was, as you recall, in my staff memo, the conversation began with a meeting that was requested by Directors Murphy and Villalta, and that sat down with me, I think, in August, and shared their concerns about the validity of the amendment and whether or not that meant the agency JPA had expired. Normally, that would have led to me putting an item on that said something at the request of Directors Murphy and Villalta. I'm seeking board direction to whether or not you would like me to spend any effort or time or resources on exploring this. But because of the nature of the concerns that were shared with me, that could have potentially resulted in a determination at some point, hypothetically, that the agency couldn't take action on something, and we had such a big agenda coming up for the fall, I wanted to get quicker to that answer, to have something to move on. So I identified and worked with an attorney out of Fresno, Baker, Manick, and Jensen, and I basically asked 2 questions and gave him everything I could find and said, was this amendment, did the board have the authority to do this amendment in 2013, and is the JPA expired, or did that amendment extend it by 10 years? That's basically the gist of what it was. And so that was a conversation, and I was seeking some direction so that I could bring something to this board for discussion. So in doing so, the intention without direction from the board wasn't to go outside to assume before getting any direction from the board, to exclude the board counsel and work with another attorney to give direction to the governing board. It was I have concerns from directors. I hear their concerns. I'm going to get an outside opinion to help me determine how I want to bring this item forward. And in doing so, the summary conclusion of that opinion was provided, but without any board direction, I was hesitant to include an extensive analysis on an issue from an outside attorney that I did not have board direction to pursue at all. So it was suggested that remain attorney-client privileged outside of any direction of this board to do otherwise. I hope that clarifies it.
Thank you, Stacy. Very good.
Yes, Supervisor Murphy? Director Murphy.
If I could, I'd like to just sort of frame what the issue may or may not be. This is an issue that was sort of brought to me. It's not one that I have a long history with, but I think it might be helpful for the board to see sort of what the issue is. And it's going to take a couple page flips in the documents, but I think that's the only way to really do it. So in the packet, on page 242. So 242, you can't see this, but you can see where the highlighting is up at the top. It says the date. So this is the amended and restated JPA that says it's dated 18th day of July 2013. So that's one point. But then if you go to page 245, so you flip over a couple pages. Section 4.1, again, you can't see it, but you can see where the highlighting is on the effective date. It says this agreement shall be dated as of and become effective on the date of its execution by the last agency to adopt it. So it talks about being executed and adopted by each agency. If you flip the page to the end of this document, which is page 254, see there's only one party that executed it, and that was Jerry O'Banion, and it was also, so it was not executed by the members. The members are the entities that we represent, and it also wasn't adopted by them. So if you go back to the prior amendment in 2007, those were adopted and executed by those agencies. It wasn't a board chair signature only. So that becomes part of the issue, right, is that. And then there's also this sort of discrepancy, questions around when the agreement terminates. So as was mentioned, the JPA has a life of 10 years unless it's renewed. It sunsets. So I mentioned the amendment in 2007, and then there was this other one that happened in 2013. If you look at, and I'm going to pull up here. This is a letter from. This is the agenda packet. It's page 241. So you go to the page before it, 240. You can see that it's an agenda item. This is item 12E from July of 2013. So this is when this was brought before this board to be adopted, and when Supervisor O'Banion signed it. So the page behind it is page 241. And this is a letter from Robert Hayden to Margie Kern, the executive director at the time. It's a short letter. It's a 2-page letter, but the second paragraph, again, I've got highlighting if you want to just reference. That second paragraph reads, in the course of this process, this is from Robert Hayden, we have checked on the date each agreement terminates. We have calendared this and suggest that you have someone there do the same. For MCAG, the current termination date is July 16th, 2017. For transit, it's May 10th, 2020, and then it goes on, talks about regional waste, December 1, 2036. So there's a real issue as to how these things all come together. So that's, I just want to walk the board through what the issue is, right? And so I think it deserves attention. I think that it deserves attention from outside counsel, just to avoid at least the appearance of conflict. I mean, our current counsel is the one that's sort of in the middle of this. I think that we should have a closed session to hear what the analysis is. The work's been done. And to Director Silvera's question, I mean, the answer is to fix MCAG. I mean, the answer is not to blow up MCAG or in any way, but to fix it. And so, I have the same information that you do in terms of that cover letter summary from the outside attorney with his opinion, but there's no analysis to understand sort of the reason why. I'm very interested in that. I mean that, as an attorney myself, I can't help but just have a number of questions in my mind in terms of the way that he arrived at where he did, but I'd like to hear what they are.
Yeah, Mike, I guess the letter from Robert Hayden was July 8th, right? So that was before the meeting where the item come before it. So on July 8th, that was the termination date of the 17th. And then however, right, whether this needs to go back to all the jurisdictions for ratification or not, that was standing. Once the new amendment that came in 2013, well, then the date would have changed from 2017 to 2023.
I think you've touched on that's the issue, right? That's the question. And in terms of your point about the date of the Hayden letter, it's because it was part of the agenda packet item that came when that came up. And so there's direction here from the law office saying that we need to calendar this. I mean, why else would it be direction to calendar? If I mean, that's why. So
I guess I don't understand. My definition of calendar is like, okay, you need to put on the calendar. I took that more as that, hey, we should try to get all of these on the same timeline instead of having the waste management sunset at this time and the YARTS, if it wasn't there at the time, but just all these different groups that we represent do it at a different time. I took it as make sure you get them all on a calendar to look at them. And so I get it. I see that you're wearing your lawyer hat and that intrigues you, but again, it still doesn't answer the question. What is?
I've answered your question. I think
you've not answered it. Excuse me, it's my turn. You've not answered my question. You've given me the legalese on this and the date and that, but what is trying to be achieved here? For me, it's. I don't know. I don't like. It seems disingenuous. We're talking about a couple dates, and what is the outcome if you play this out? And so the dates are wrong. So you're saying MCAG was invalid. I think that there's some thought out there that would say you kept continuing to come to meetings, so therefore you made it valid. Do you want it to go back and undo everything that's been done since then? That's the part that I would wish somebody would come and say. So if it's just to point out and clarify that, hey, we need to get the dates right, I make a motion that we correct the dates and move on. Like that would be my motion. Is if there's some other hidden deal that's going on here that I don't know about or I can't see, please enlighten me. But other than that, it just seems like it's a gotcha game, and I don't want to be a part of that. I'm sorry.
Supervisor Villalta. Art Director.
You're elevating everyone.
This is the motion?
That's the motion.
I made the motion. Oh, you made it the motion. Okay, we do have a motion on the floor.
A discussion?
Second.
So I have a second? So yes, yeah, now we'll go back for comments.
Okay. Again, I have not seen the backup info. I would like to see that. We spent all this money, and then we're making a recommendation based on partial information. And I don't think that's what this group is about. We spent good money. We spent taxpayers' money, and now we're throwing that out. We're not even looking at as to why the analysis was given. And just because I hope someone isn't thinking of getting their feelings hurt, and we're not trying to blow up MCAG. We're here to correct what we need to correct. And if it needs to go to the entities, then it needs to go to the entities. But I can't make that determination, and I don't think it's fair to have a first and a second when we haven't seen the analysis. We paid for that analysis. Why can't we have it? Just to look at it and have a closed session meeting. I don't see anything wrong with that. We're not hurting anyone. MCAG is still functioning. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Director Murphy.
Thank you. I mean, let me answer your question as directly as I can, which I tried to do before. The goal is to fix it. The goal is not to undo anything in the past. The goal is not to blow it up. In fact, the JPA says that even if it terminates, the bond obligations live on. So, we should be fully informed. We have legal analysis that's already been done. What's the harm in having a briefing on what that is behind closed doors? I get to ask you a question, I guess.
My question, or your question, is I don't need that to move forward. That's maybe what you need, but I don't need that to move forward. I'm comfortable with my motion, and I'll leave that stand.
But my question is, what's the harm? We're asking each other questions, I guess.
It's fine. There is no harm in it, but I don't need it to move
Let's
forward.
do it.
And so I'm perfectly fine with my motion. Thank you.
Supervisor or Director Pereira?
I am a supervisor.
You are.
Finally, you were right.
Not here. You're wearing a different hat.
Yeah, I know. So the question that I still have, right, is there is a conflict in the agreement, right? It does say, as Mike pointed out, that it needs to be ratified by the agencies. And so, if the agencies haven't ratified it, I mean, does the original agreement say that subsequent amendments don't have to be ratified?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let Stacy.
That's correct.
The prior amendment to the board, the prior amendment that Director Murphy referenced in 2017 that was 2007, that was ratified, adopted, or signed by all the jurisdictions, provided this board the authority to amend the JPA with the exception of one clause on termination in future amendments. So it actually included language to be able to amend the document moving forward at the 2/3 vote of this body. So that explains from the analysis that it identified in 07, it was giving that authority to the board was something that was agreed upon by all of the jurisdictions, and then subsequent amendments were that authority was provided to the board to do, which would have been the 2013 amendment.
Okay, the one thing I didn't see here was a motion and a vote. So did a motion and a vote happen at the board meeting in 2013? Did it meet the 2/3 threshold?
The 2013 item, I can look. I have it in my notes, but I don't know if you know.
I was there. If you'd like me to answer that question.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
It was passed unanimously.
Okay. So then, with that being said, I just don't see I don't see the need for anything else. I'm ready to vote.
And I'll add to council's comment. So the letter that's in the packet that was from the Haydens from the counselor to Executive Director Kern that references calendaring it was provided as part of the agenda item, as you mentioned, later that month for that amendment. And at the last part of that paragraph, it mentions that the recommendation to go on consent calendar. And I did pull up the minutes of that meeting, and that item was on the consent calendar for that board meeting that was adopted unanimously.
Director Murphy.
So there wouldn't be a problem if the 2013 amendment didn't have that language in it that says this becomes effective when it's executed and adopted. If it didn't have that, then it wouldn't be an issue, because you could fall back on the 2007 language that says we don't need it. But because that's what this board adopted a document unanimously that said it becomes effective when it's executed by each agency and it's adopted by each agency. That's what this board, different people, but this board, that's what they acted on in 2013, and I don't think there's any dispute of that. And so, and again, I go back to, I think that we have a duty to understand this, and I don't see any harm. I see a lot of harm in. I think we can disagree on the substance, but we can all, I hope, agree on a fair process to talk and understand what the issues are.
Director Lohr.
Thank you. So my question then is, if that is the clause that is important, is the most important, right? Because you're saying if it wasn't in there, then there wouldn't be an issue. So the clause says the agreement shall be dated as of and become effective on the date of its execution by the last agency to adopt it, right? So then
execute and adopt. Section 4.1. The date of its execution by the last agency to adopt it.
Okay, of its execution by the last agency to adopt it. So then define execution.
Signature.
Is that the legal?
Well, actually, the document in two places specifically says what the effective date is. It specifically says that in the definitions, and it specifically says that in the first paragraph of the document. So there's no question about when the effective date is. It's specific. The other was a word processing error. My error. That's all it was. And all it needs to do is be corrected. We make errors in documents all the time, and we fix them.
Mr. Chair.
Director Murphy.
So I get sort of scorned for wearing lawyer's hat, but the county MCAG attorney, I need to respond. I mean, one of the first things that you learn in your first semester of contracts class in law school is how to interpret a contract. What Mr. Hayden is referring to is the recitals, the beginning of the JPA, which, if there's a conflict, does not control. So I would go into it with an open mind, but I'd like to hear what the attorney has to say. In fact, he's already done the work. I mean, we're taking advice from, frankly, the council is conflicted in this situation and is weighing in on its own behalf.
Well, I'm not conflicted. I'm just telling you what went on. If you want information about what happened, I'm the only one here who can tell you. I was there. I was there in 2007. I was there in 2013. And I can read the document also, and it says in two places. Not one, it's effective on July 18th. That's what it says.
In the recitals.
No, it's, Mr. Murphy, read the document. It says it in the definitions also. If you look at that. Have you looked at that?
I've looked at it.
Okay. Well, you only mentioned one. You don't want to mention the other.
So then I have one other question. Then when it uses, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had Director Villalta.
Thank you. My point is keeping this confidential would lead someone to challenge your conclusion. If it was strong, then there shouldn't be a problem with releasing the document so we can all see it. There's a difference between a minor change in the bylaws and a major change. Extending it for 10 years is a major change, and that should have gone to the jurisdictions.
But that's not in the bylaws. Supervisor Pereira.
Okay, sorry for going out of turn. So do we have a definition of in item 4 or article 4 of what the agency is?
It's,
You got it?
Are you speaking if it's just specifically MCAG and and the jurisdictions?
Yeah, could it be MCAG as the agency?
Yes. You mean as opposed to?
Each individual jurisdiction, city and...
Oh, I see what you mean. Then I'm going to retract what I just said because I don't want to make sure I understand what you're asking, and I would defer to council.
Again, the clause at issue was a mistake. And all you have to do is correct it. And people correct contracts and leases and judgments all the time, every day, when they find out that there's been an error and they can correct it. Yeah. To correct this document would take 30 seconds. And then you wouldn't have these issues to deal with anymore and use your brain cells on. So I'm just saying, I was here. I apologize for a proofreading error that resulted from a word processing carryover.
Director Lahr.
Thank you. So I wanted to answer your question. There's definitions, and on page 255, agency/agencies means the public entities which are or have been members of the authority, and agencies are members of the authority. Is what I'm getting from that definition. And then on page 257 of the packet, member means one of the public entities listed in Exhibit B, which is all of the jurisdictions. And so when we're looking at definitions, there throughout the document, board members have been used, and board members have been used, and it's capitalized, and there is no definition for board members. But let's take the definition of members from the list of definitions, which means the public entities listed in Exhibit B. So it's all how you interpret it. So if the agreement to be duly executed and attested by the board chair as of the date set below, if we're looking at how we define it, then agencies are members and members are agencies. So when the members voted at the board meeting to execute it, then everybody executed it at the same time, at the same space. So if you're defining execution as physically signing the paper, then that's different.
Correct.
First. Supervisor Pereira was next.
So
then it's Villalta, and then it's you.
I know we have a motion, and I would like to get the motion reread at some point. But it seems to me that if we were to correct the word processing error by striking 4.1, then and it was passed by 2/3 of this board at a future meeting, that we would be back in compliance, so to speak. So it just seems pretty simple to me, and I don't understand why we're trying to make, it seemed like it's a bigger deal than it is. So could I get the motion read back, please? Well, no, that'd be from Joy, I think.
The motion that I heard was to count, correct the dates, and move on.
Me too.
That was a very brief. Yes, that was a good description of my comments. I'm pretty sure. Yes, correct the dates. Let's move on. That's my motion. I mean, that encompasses corrected ambiguities, identified, and bring the corrected agreement to the governing board at a future meeting for review or ratification.
Villalta.
So I consulted with our attorney again on the documents and the backup, and again, what crossed his mind was, this is why, if we've already released the summary, why wouldn't we release the backup? And number two, he kept focusing in on a major and minor change. And if we're going to give the entities the benefit of the doubt and say a 10-year extension without consulting the entities, then we're wrong. I don't understand why we're worried about being transparent, and there shouldn't be any problem with that, because what we should be is as clear as possible. We see what's happening in Washington already, and I don't think we want to be that. I think what we want to do is review everything that we have and then come to a conclusion. And if the conclusion's the same, the conclusion is the same. But it just baffles me as to why we want to make sure that we're not going to create any future problems for ourselves either. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if anyone on this board does. Thank you.
Director Murphy.
Oh.
I'm on.
Oh, you were up first?
Yep. It's the timing, Mayor. Excuse me, Director Villalta. It's the timing of it. It just seemed, if this was such a huge deal back in 2017, why is it that we're all the way now until 2019 before it's brought forward? I wasn't here, so please give me the reason why all of a sudden this is an emergency. We're concerned because of this date. Is it? And then I would ask you this: is play the scenario out. You see the document. It says exactly what you read in the summary, but in a little bit longer lawyer version. So then what's the next step? And it says the same thing. Are we going to find another reason to look at it longer, send it back, re-vote? I don't know. I'm trying to get to the bottom of what is this actually about?
May I answer?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the answer was that it never came to the board because it was handled through the director, Patrick Pittenger and Mr. Hayden. And it was done, and they dismissed it, and it never got to the board level. So, and that's what happened.
Okay.
It never got to us.
So who brought it up then? How did it never? So you're saying that this was brought up in 2017, given to the board, given to staff, and they just told you the board doesn't even need to know about this. And then where was the outcry then? I would have been up here if that was the case, and I felt like I was wrong. I'd have been up here pounding on this table at every meeting saying the rest of the board needs to see this.
Yeah. Well, that didn't happen.
I think you were the chair at the time.
I don't remember.
I call for the question. Yeah. I'm ready to do it. Okay. You do what you want.
Okay, and I'll call for a roll call vote. On the motion to correct the ambiguities identified and bring the correct agreement to the governing board at a future meeting to review and ratify. Change the dates and get it done.
Is it change the date, or is it to strike the 4.1?
Let me restate my motion, and I'll ask Director Laura if she's okay with the wording of it. Is yes, I did just say move the dates, and that was my short Portuguese version of it. This is again, it's to correct the ambiguities identified and bring the corrected agreement to the governing board at a future meeting for review and ratification.
And you're okay with the second? Okay, call for the vote.
Director Aguilar? Director Raymond?
Yes.
Director Espinoza? Director Hoag?
Yes.
Director Lohr?
Yes.
Director Murphy?
No.
Director Oliveira?
Yes.
Director Pereira?
Yes.
Director Silvera?
Yes.
Director Villalta?
No.
Motion carries.
Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to make a subsequent motion. Since the motion did not talk about what to do about closed session, I'd like to make a motion to have a closed session on this item.
I have a first and a second.
Okay.
Hold on. Writing for council.
I do not know whether a closed session on this item fits within the definitions of what can happen in a closed session under the Brown Act. I do not know that, so I would have to research that to make sure. And I don't think you can invent closed session items in potential violation of the Brown Act just by desire. So I would ask for your indulgence in giving me the opportunity to look that up and make sure that that is appropriate. There are only certain items that can be discussed in closed session, and that's why we agendize them, and there are only a few of them. So that would be my request as council.
Duly noted. We got a motion and a second.
If there's no discussion, I call for the question. Okay,
Let's do a roll call vote on that.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, so the motion is then for a closed session, and if there's not a closed session?
I would say we should have a closed session if there's additional research that needs to be done that comes back that is a legal reason. Otherwise, we're not going to do something illegal. But absent that, I think there is justification, and I don't want to hold that up because there's uncertainty from council as to whether we can go into closed session, not to take action, but to review, frankly, an attorney-client privileged memo.
So what I'm looking at, and if I could help you with the motion maybe, is so we've already passed it that they want to make the changes and come forward. So we're going to review it next time for ratification. So maybe your motion should be put it on for the future meeting, closed session, before, so we can review that with the change.
Yes.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
It isn't a closed session item. It absolutely is not a closed session item when ratification comes back to you, Mr. Chairman. So there's a motion before you, there's a second before you. If it passes, I'll weigh in on what the legal issue is with regard to making a motion, which is not on the agenda, an item not on the agenda, to do a closed session.
I disagree. So we've got a motion and a second, though.
And let's call for the roll call vote.
Director Aguilar? Director Raymond?
Based on what I'm hearing, and seems to be hiding something, I'm a yes.
Director Espinoza? Director Hogue?
Yes, I guess. Yes.
Director Lohr?
No.
Director Murphy?
Yes.
Director Oliveira?
No.
Director Pereira?
No.
Director Silvera?
No.
Director Villalta?
Yes.
Director Chair McDaniel?
No.
Motion fails.
It's a sad day for us, for the residents of Merced County.
So we'll move to item number 25, other reports, the executive director's report, and you sent that report out.
Nothing additional.
Now we'll move on to 26, director's report. Are there any reports from any of the directors? Director Pereira.
In the calendar that we received earlier, I just wanted to mention that on November 15th is the CalCog meeting, and it wasn't on there. I just wanted to let you know, and I'll be going.
Any other directors have anything to report? So at this time, we'll move into closed session. Do I need to read?